I was like, let's see what this guy did in his career anyway. I saw Rookie of the Year, NBA Championship, USA Olympic gold medal, second in assists, fifth in made threes, blah, blah, blah. I was like, Jesus freaking Christ, how can I compete with that? I better zip it.
You are Locked On Fantasy Basketball, your daily podcast on fantasy basketball. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Fantasy Basketball podcast brought to you by Fantrax and Basketball Monster. And also today's show is brought to you by Charles Oakley, today's Patreon sponsor. So thank you to Charles, not a real name. Maybe it is a real name. It's not a real name. Thank you for sponsoring the show via Patreon. And if you want to do that, head to patreon.com/redrock_bball. My name is Josh Lloyd, and as always, you can find me on Twitter at redrock_bball. We've got NBA action to break down. There were 8 games on Tuesday. There are 7 games coming up for Wednesday. So
let's get to it.
We'll start off with the monstrous line of the night, and for the second time in the last couple of days, Isaiah Thomas gets the nod here. 29 points for Isaiah, had 4 rebounds, 15 assists. So he went from a 50-point game with 0 assists to a game with 15 assists. Had a steal, hit 5 triples, went 10 of 18 from the field, and hit all 4 of his free throws, and Thomas has been ridiculously good. He's the 6th ranked player over the last 2 weeks, the 3rd ranked player over the last week, but as we saw today with Kyle Lowry, sometimes these unsustainable shooting runs drop off. Now, Thomas is shooting at over 50% over the last 2 weeks, so yes, that's somewhat unsustainable considering he was at 43 and 42 the last 2 years in featured roles with Boston. Over the last week, he's at 58% and 62% from 3, so there's no way that those numbers can continue. Now, he has improved significantly as a shooter this year, taking his true shooting from 56 up to 61, but even that feels like it's due for regression at some point. So, not to hate on Isaiah Thomas, but he's not continuing to go 37, 3, and 8, which he's done over the last 3 games. He's not continuing to go 32, 2.5, and 8 with 3.4 triples, which he's done over his last 7 games. That is not happening. If someone thinks Isaiah Thomas can remain a top 10 player, then you sell him off for a top 10 player. He's got a chance to be a top 20 guy, no doubt about that, but the drop-off between top 5 and top 20 is almost equivalent to the drop-off between top 20 and top 100. That's how big of a gap there is. So there is a significant drop-off if Thomas was happening to fall down. He's hit, over the last 3 games, 30 free throws. Hasn't missed any. Has hit 30 of them. In fact, he's hit his last 38 free throw attempts, which is obviously a huge boon for that category. He's been great in that category all season, one of the top free throw contributors in the entire NBA, up in that top 3 grouping with Jim Butler and Kawhi Leonard. But again, I just feel that there is some efficiency drop-off coming, and that reduces his points. His assists aren't totally strong. He's a poor steals guy. So there is going to be some sort of a drop coming for Thomas, but at the moment, he's putting up ridiculous numbers, and you obviously love it. You love it in DFS. You love it in seasonal leagues. The numbers that are coming at the moment are elite, the elite of the elite. But him being able to maintain that is probably going to be somewhat of a tough ask, I believe. Look, you might have it. I'd love to hear it if you've got a differing opinion and you think that Isaiah can actually continue at this rate and get better, but I'm pretty confident that he won't, and there is going to be some sort of a drop-off coming for Isaiah Thomas as we progress through the season. The waiver wire line of the night is also the young gun of the night, and it is Willie Reed of the Miami Heat. Now, Reed with no Hassan Whiteside, no James Johnson, which is important to note. 22 points for Reed, 18 boards, 2 assists, 1 steal, 2 blocks. He did it in 32 minutes. He was 11 of 16 from the field. Now, we've seen some pretty decent games from Will Reed before. At the end of last season in Brooklyn, when Brook Lopez was sitting out some games, he had a 14-8 game with 4 blocks. He had a 13-6 game with 2 blocks. And then he had some mental issues that caused him to leave the team for the last 5 games of the season. And we didn't know what we'd see from Reed. He came in this year and he's been a consistent guy, getting 10 to 12 minutes a night without really putting up any sort of explosive lines. Today is obviously different. But I do again urge some caution with Will Reed here. Yes, Whiteside could miss the remainder of the road trip. There are 5 more games left. He's already been ruled out for Wednesday. So we will Reed is going to start on Wednesday. But the last game that Whiteside missed, which people do conveniently forget, the game against Detroit, Whiteside was out of that one. Willie Reed started. He went for 4 and 2 in 18 minutes. So the difference between those two games is James Johnson played in one of them, and James Johnson didn't play in today's game. They went with a lot of James Johnson at centre in that game against Detroit. Johnson was not available, and Willie Reed was fantastic. Again, I'm not trying to take anything away from him, but we do have to look at circumstances. So I am all for owning Willie Reed for tomorrow, but I don't believe that he is going to have sustainable long-term value, and he could easily go back to playing 22 or 23 minutes if James Johnson happens to be healthy. Johnson suffering from food poisoning, just an epidemic across the NBA that caused him to miss today's game with pretty late notice, and that gave Reed extra run. Whether or what Spoelstra does with that remains to be seen, but his other option at centre today was Udonis Haslem. So you can sort of understand why Reed was getting big minutes. Again, not to take anything away from how he performed, because it was a great performance, and he has shown definite flashes of this throughout his career, especially late in Brooklyn last season. But for him to continue to do this, it's going to take a reversal from Spoelstra on what he did in that previous game when both of those players were healthy. And I bring this up just so you're cautious about who you drop to add Reed. Is it someone who's going to have consistent top 100 value to maybe get a game out of Reed that might not even be useful? So that's the concern with Will Reed here. Huge numbers, huge performance, but could this be a high watermark? Yeah, absolutely, because again, if James Johnson returns, he is playing some minutes at centre. It might only be 5, it might only be 6, but you take those 5 or 6 off Reed, and he doesn't play 32, and he plays 26, 27, or maybe some of them come off Haslem, or he's not as successful as he was in this game, then his production dips pretty significantly. So that's what I'd like to do in this podcast as well, is talk about what's happening, talk about what I think happens, but also talk about reasons for why something happened, and reasons maybe not to get 100% carried away. It's always fine to take a flyer on guys and be hopeful that you might get 5 great games out of Willie Reed, but the odds are telling me that you won't. But he's still absolutely worth having a look at and worth doing with 7 games on Wednesday, adding him in, and even if it's just 1 game of production, and it happens again and Johnson's out, or even if Johnson's in and it happens again, that's great. But it's about tempering expectations so a dumb move is not made in terms of you acquiring him in a trade for some reason, or dropping someone of sustained value to grab him. Deeper leagues, honestly, you're clearly holding him in, say, a 20-team league or even a 16-team league at this point, until Whiteside comes back and we see how that handles itself. But in a 10 or 12, you really want to see what you're doing before you go and make an ad of Will Reed. But huge performance from him anyway. I do suggest if you want to hear more about Will Reed, go check out Locked On Heat with Wes and David, and any podcast across the Locked On Podcast Network. I was actually just on the Locked On Spurs podcast with Jeff Garcia, so you can check that out. Also, for you people in really deep dynasty leagues, Jeff did a podcast the other day talking about one of the Spurs overseas stashes, Adam Hunger. So if you want to hear about Hunger and how he's been playing and Jeff's concerns about him, go and take a listen to that podcast. Check out whatever your favorite team is. The Locked On Network, Locked On Podcast Network has got your team covered. So go and check all those ones out. Let's talk. We won't talk Young Gun of the Night because it's Will Reed again. Let's go to the dud of the night. And it is a Toronto Raptor. You people who are watching know exactly who it is, but maybe if you're listening, you might think it's Kyle Lowry, and it's not. It's his teammate Jonas Valanciunas, who was pretty terrible. 2 points for Valanciunas with 6 rebounds. He was 1 of 5 from the field. And I've been a big supporter of Valanciunas, but he has been struggling this season in a big way. His advanced stats have all taken a significant tumble. The Raptors are actually 10 points per 100 possessions better with him on the bench than they are with him on the court. Last season it was a negative 1.5, so it is a big difference. Drop off there, we're talking negative defensive box score plus minus when he was a positive last year. His offensive box score plus minus has dipped. His win shares, his PER, now his PER is still good, it's almost 20. His true shooting is still 60, but he has definitely dropped off this season, and we're seeing the minutes consistently get limited. Now, it didn't necessarily work in this game limiting him because the Raptors still got killed, and a lot of that's to do with Valanciunas, but I'm just thinking that the fit with him in Toronto is not the best for him moving forward. I think he still can be a really effective player in the right system, but with the way Casey treats him and the way that their team is set up offensively and defensively, it's not the best fit for Valanciunas. He still should be owned in leagues, but obviously the drop-off is pretty significant. And in this drop-off, so he's averaging 23 minutes over the last 2 weeks. He's still ranked 109th, so it's not a complete disaster where he's ranked 300th or something like that. He's still returning value, but it's only 9.5 points and 8.3 rebounds. And these are numbers that we haven't really seen from him since his rookie year. That's how poor he is going this year. He's still shooting 88 from the line, which is great from a big man, 54% from the field, but his block numbers have dropped ridiculously. He was at 1.3 and 1.2 the last 2 years in 26 minutes. He's at 27 minutes this year and at 0.7. So really fallen off defensively in that sense. His scoring, his field goal percentage has actually dipped as well. Has not been a great season for Valanciunas so far. And he did start the season out really promisingly, but I am starting to get worried with Casey and the way that he is running things and the way that Valanciunas is playing. It is somewhat of a concern. So maybe we just never see top 50 numbers from Valanciunas while he's in Toronto. That's the concern that I have with him at the moment, or while Casey is in Toronto, or while DeRozan, or while Lowry, or whoever it is. While the way this team is currently structured is happening in Toronto, I am a little bit worried about what Valanciunas can do, but he was pretty terrible in this game. Defensively, he was getting killed by the Spurs. The entire Raptors team got killed, so it's not fair to completely single him out, but we're just adding it up with what else has happened across the season. It has not been a good one for Jonas Valanciunas so far, which is unfortunate because I do actually really like him as a player, and I think he can be a really useful player, or a very good player, in fact. Let's talk about the games now in extra detail. There were 8 of them on Tuesday. The first one was one that I think majority of people were watching, and it was the Minnesota Timberwolves and the Philadelphia 76ers. The Sixers got out to a huge lead, and they were they were 20 points up at one point, and they were blowing out the Timberwolves. The Timberwolves came back and tied the game on a Ricky Rubio three-pointer with 2 seconds left, because why not? And then the Sixers win it on a Bob Cove tip-in, because again, why not? The guy that had been booed all night for not hitting his shots hits the game winner. Let's start with Minnesota. Zachary LaVine played 40 minutes, 28 points, 3 triples, 2 steals and a block, and ridiculously efficient, going 11 of 20 from the field, while Townsy was getting towed up by Embiid to start off, but still put up a 23, 15 and 5 with 2 blocks. Unfortunately, just the 9 of 22 from the field from Towns. Gorgie Jing, this is Gorgie Jing in a nutshell. 10 and 9, a steal and 2 blocks with good percentages. And he is still really underrated in fantasy. People act like he's a fringe guy, but he is a solid player who has had his moments this year, definitely, but this is sort of what he does. Rick Rubio only had the 5 points, including that game winner, 3 rebounds, 5 assists and 2 steals, but importantly for his owners, he played 30 minutes, while Chrissy Dunn only got the 18 and went scoreless and picked up 5 fouls in that time. So we had a mini breakout from Dunn in the last game, and then it's just back to business as usual here. Nemanja Bjelica played 23 minutes, got some extra run in that blowout phase of the game, while Wigo was terrible. 2 of 15 for 8 points for Wigo, 5 rebounds, 3 assists and a steal. And the big thing that's really affecting him this year are his steal numbers are down, his block numbers are down, his field goal percentage is down, his free throw percentage is down. He's got his threes up significantly, his rebounds and assists are about the same, and his scoring is up. But those other categories, which sometimes go undervalued or undernoticed, are really dipping what he can do. We're talking about 30 spots lower than where he was in the rankings last season. I still do think he can turn it around because he gets the efficiency back going. He starts to do something defensively, which again, at this point is feeling like more and more of a question mark. But his 22 points a game is obviously useful. You just want these other things to start to come along, and he has been a real disappointment in that regard so far this season. For the Sixers, they just keep booing Bob Cove. Like, I know he missed a lot of shots, but in the end, he finished up with 13 and 10 with a 3, 4 steals and a block. Really hard to go past that for a really good line from a fantasy point of view. He's owned in 64% of leagues, which just feels insanity to me. That is the same amount of leagues that Nerlens Noel is owned in, which is ridiculous. It is the same amount of leagues, less than Jahlil Okafor is owned in, which again is ridiculous. And Covington needs to be owned in every league. He's a top 90 player, even taking into consideration his field goal percentage. But in any situation, whatever team is in the league that has got a poor field goal percentage, add him. The defense is fantastic. He will have nights where he gets hot and hits some threes and gives you bonus field goal percentage. But that's as good as line as there is, and there is actually room for him to improve from here. They started Joel Embiid and Ersan Ilyasova, leaving Jalil Okafor and Nerlens Noel on the bench. So Ilyasova played 32. He went 19 and 5 with 3 triples and a block. Just filling his role perfectly. Own him. Embiid, 25 and 8, 2 blocks and a steal, and the most impressive number with that box score is 30 minutes. So that's above the 28 minutes. So that's we're moving there. And Brett Brown pre-game said he has no issues with Joel Embiid playing in the All-Star game if he gets selected. No issues with him physically. So again, that's a time where he could have time off, but they're not worried about it. So everything seems to be going in the right direction for Embiid. TJ McConnell started again. 6 points, but 7 boards, 8 assists, 2 steals, hustling his ass off as he always does. And with the way that he has played, and his chemistry in particular with Nerlens Noel, I think, and this is purely speculation, I think that when Spanish Chocolate returns, which is likely for the next game, that we are going to see more of a, say, 25-23 split, 24-24 split even, and maybe McConnell even continues to start. It's going to make it hard for you to own either Rodriguez or McConnell, but it's going to take Spanish Chocolate away from being a guy that you want to own in most situations. Šarić got his 24 minutes, 8 and 7, with an assist and 2 steals here. So he is definitely rising up, not to 12-team level, but 14 and 16 teams, yeah. And what we saw in this one is the elimination of Jalil Okafor. Nerlens Noel entered the rotation before him. They played some minutes of Noel and Embiid together, not many, but they played some together, and Okafor was the third center in. He played 10 minutes, Okafor 2 points, 4 rebounds and 2 blocks, and with the minutes consistently trending down, I can't see the reasoning behind owning him at this point. He's not going to play unless Embiid is out, and there'll be the games that Embiid sits with back-to-backs, but at this point you have to think, will they start Noel and leave Okafor on the bench and play him 20 minutes? It's really tough to own him, and I hope that this means that they trade Okafor, but there's non-basketball factors involved in that. There's Noel's impending restricted free agency salary and Noel's personality issues as well, which rubs the team the wrong way. So we'll see how that goes. But Noel was engaged. He had 8 points, 1 board and 1 steal in his 11 minutes, but he again only saw 11 minutes. And I can see this is the rotation moving forward. Ilyasova, Šarić at the 4, Embiid, Noel, Okafor at the 5. And that is going to mean that it's going to require a trade. But say Okafor gets traded from Philly, Noel doesn't become a standard league guy. Say Noel gets traded somewhere, like where does he go that he gets 28 minutes a night? It's tough. And if you're in do or die situations, holding onto these guys is not the right way to go. Source Castillo started 8-3-2 in 32 minutes. Really has an aversion to starting for whatever reason that is. And that meant that we got some early Timothé Luwawu-Cabarrot, who had 4-2 in his 22 minutes. Obviously, he's not ready to contribute in a big way, but it was good seeing him out there in the first quarter, and I do think that he can be a decent, maybe top 150 contributor at some point throughout the next 4 to 5 seasons. That's, we're talking deep league dynasty stuff there with Luwawu-Cabarrot. The next game we have a look at, it is the Utah Jazz and the Boston Celtics. No Georgie Hill again for this one. They also left Alec Burks out. He was questionable. They didn't say whether he'd play or not, but he didn't get into the game in that second game of a back-to-back after he returned. But the big positive here for the Jazz was 29 minutes for Derek Favors. I was talking about him yesterday, how he looked poor, how he looked slow, how they limited his minutes significantly, and I was worried and I wanted to see what it meant for today. Well, second half of the back-to-back, 29 minutes, 12, 6, and 7. That to me means that yesterday was a pre-planned situation in order to get him bigger minutes in this game against Boston. Now, there is another 3 games for the Jazz this week and another back-to-back on Saturday and Sunday, so he might have some minutes limits there, but that is the most we've really seen him play in this recent stretch by a long way. The best he has also played as well, so let's hope this is the road to recovery from Favors and he sticks it at 30, 31 minutes a night and gets back to that top 50 sort of a range. Rudy Gobert with Favors back, the offense dipped, which was to be expected, 8 and 13 for Rude with a block, and Gordie Hayward had 23 points, including 3 triples. It was also a bit of a throwback night for Joey Johnson, who had 17 points in his 21 minutes, hit 3 triples, had 2 blocks, had 2 assists. But, I wouldn't be reading a huge amount into that big night from Joe, while the other Joe, Ingles, had 7, 5, and 4. Rod Hood was terrible, again, 3 and 10 from the field for Rod. 3 of 6 from the line is horrible. His free throw shooting is at 70% over the last 2 weeks. Needs to be better than that. I don't believe that Rod is a 10-team must-own guy. I still would think that you want to hold him in 12-teamers. but he is really, really struggling, whether this is the after effects of another case of gastroenteritis in the NBA. When he first went out, I said, look, I don't expect him to miss much time unless he's suffering from amoebic dysentery. Maybe he did. Maybe this is what actually happened, and he had amoebic dysentery, and he just shit his pants for 48 hours straight and lost like 20 kilos, which is like 40 pounds for you guys in America. I've got no other explanation behind why he got sick and then came back and is terrible now. It's weird. He will bounce back. He is a good player. But in 10-team leagues, I don't think there's much reason to necessarily hold on to him. Shelvin Mack only played the 26 in a start here, while Raul Neto played 14 minutes and had 5, 2, and 1. So nothing really to see with those point guards. With Georgie Hill out, hopefully Hill returns pretty soon. For the Celtics, Jay Crowder was ridiculous. 21 points for Jay on just 8 shots. Hit 5 triples, had 3 rebounds and a steal. A really nice performance from him, and he's sort of settled into that mid-round range, while Al Horford had 21, 5, and 4. Again, lacking the rebounding, but the other numbers for Horford were great, including the 3 triples. Avery Bradley returned, had 14 points in 36 minutes, and Marcus Smart was able to play through his illness. 9 points with 3 assists in 28 minutes for Smarty. Not much point dealing with Smart in a 10-teamer, and a 12-teamer is probably touch and go. A borderline sort of a player there. Gerald Green back out of the rotation, replaced by Jaylen Brown, who had 10 points in 13 minutes. A good showing from Brown, but nothing for us to get overly excited about. The Celtics are not going to be in any sort of tank position come February when rookies tend to start to get extra minutes. There's no real path for him to get excessive playing time. Amir Johnson played 28 minutes, had 3 blocks and 6 points. The minutes are nice, but we know that we just can't trust that to be a consistent thing moving forward. Unfortunately, the next game we take a look at is the Indiana Pacers and the Detroit Pistons. Paulie George, who had been fairly poor mid-December, has picked it up fantastically. 32 points here, and importantly, he went 10 of 17 from the field, and he hit all 10 of his free throws. His three-pointers had dried up as well, but over the last 4 games, he's hit 14 of those. He hit 2 here, had 2 blocks and 6 rebounds, so let's hope that he can sustain this sort of production. Miles Turner had a Richie Beno, which, for the people asking, let me explain the Richie Beno, because there's plenty. I think I got bombarded by about 4 messages today asking me what a Richie Beno is. You people living in Australia, you know who Richie Beno is. If you're living in any other of the cricket-playing nations in the world, you know who Richie Beno is. Richie Beno is a famous Australian cricketer, and he was more well known for being basically the voice of cricket through the last 50 years as an announcer. Think... who can I equate him to? Think college football Keith Jackson. All right, that's the sort of guy that he was. Think Vince Scully, except that he didn't do it just for one team. He did it all Australian summer and then went and did it all in English summer, just did it 12 months a year. He was the voice of cricket. But he had a really weird way of pronouncing things, especially the number 2. I'm digressing here, but I'll keep going. The number 2. So when he would say 2, it would be chew. Like that, so just a very weird pronunciation. And then there was a satire album brought out here in Australia with people imitating him, and it was just a constant thing that anytime that anyone who goes to do a Richie impersonation always throws in a chew for 20 chew, something along those lines. That's a horrible Richie Beno. So when someone has 2 steals, has 2 threes, and has 2 blocks, lots of 2s, a 2-2-2, which in my head makes me go chew chew chew, that's a Richie Beno. That is the longest explanation for really what is probably a really shit story, but that's what I call a double triple one, a Richie Beno. Anyway, Miles Turner had that, so a good night from him. Sorry for that complete distraction. Jeffy Teague, 17, 3 and 8 with a 3 and a steal, so he had that ankle problem, was able to play through it, and clearly didn't bother him. For Monte Ellis, people might look at this and go, yes, it's Monte Ellis, he's back. Monte, 16 points. Yep, I'm going to go grab him. I don't. He played 20 minutes. All right, played 20 minutes, was 6 of 6 from the field. If there's one thing you know about Monte Ellis, he's not hitting 6 from 6 from the field every night. So, yeah, on a night where he didn't miss, he played 20 minutes. This is going to be Monte Ellis moving forward, is playing 20 minutes, playing 18 minutes, playing 21 minutes. There is no reason for Monte Ellis to be owned in 10-team leagues. There is no reason for Monte Ellis to be owned in 12-team leagues. The little dog, Glenn Robinson, had 8, 2 and 2 with a couple of blocks and a couple of threes in his 28 minutes. He's obviously just a deeper league guy as well, while Thad Young didn't really get the touches offensively, 8, 5, and 4, but had 2 steals, which is really where Thad Young's value is I love seeing Kevin Seraphin play 15 minutes and Al Jefferson playing 12. Seraphin is more important to this team, I believe, and Seraphin went 10-5, so he is a deep league name to watch. For the Pistons, 3 people scored over 20 points here, 6 in double digits, which is great for Detroit. They didn't get the victory. They still lost 121 to 116, but their offense was going. Defense is another story. Andre Drummond, 20-14, a steal, 2 blocks, and hit both his free throws. So a good night from Drummond. While Reggie Jackson is absolutely killing it at the moment. 27-12, 3 triples, 2 steals, and importantly 32 minutes. So over the last week or so, we're seeing Reggie, instead of playing 30 minutes, playing 32. And that might not seem like much, but that's the difference between being a top 70 guy and being a top 50 player for Reggie. He is scoring at an elevated rate, his assists are up, he's killing it at the moment, and if he can stay at 32 minutes, I do like his ability to be a top 50 player. Toby Harris was the 3rd player to score over 20. He had another 22 points in 30 minutes off the bench. Really loving that bench role. Ridiculously efficient as well, going 9-14. While Marcus Morris was his usual poor self. No, not poor. That's maybe unfair. 14 points for Marcus with 4 assists. Not a 12-team league guy. Johnny Lua had his best game as a starter. Played some minutes extra at center with Aaron Baines out. 14-7 for Lua in 34 minutes with a steal. He's a guy that's ranked around 110, that sort of a range, which is okay for 12-team leagues. But what's his upside? 100? Like, it's not high. I would be thinking he's probably your 12th or 13th best guy, and that puts him firmly in the stream zone, which is a little bit different to the drop zone. No, it's not. It's the same thing. It just means that if someone's out that I want, then he's gone. And that's sort of how I think you should be viewing Johnny Lua. KCP had 16 points in 39 minutes. His assist numbers have been well up this year. Another 5 here for KCP. And this team was crying out for a secondary ball handler. Maybe they've found that in Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. Boban played the 10 minutes with Bainesy out, 4-4, with 2 blocks there for Boban. But obviously, nothing to get too excited about because he does not play on a regular basis. The Washington Wizards and the Dallas Mavericks. Huge win for the Mavericks here. Scotty Brooks. Scott, any minutes restriction for Brad Beal on a back-to-back? No, mate. No restriction. We're just going to monitor everyone's minutes. John Wall played 39, Otto Porter played 37 much, and Gortat played 40, and Brad Beal played 35. This guy doesn't understand what the term monitored means, or limit means, or watching minutes means. He just says it. Maybe this is what he means. I'm going to monitor minutes. Okay, that means I'm going to watch them tick over and over and do nothing about them. Or I'm just not going to change anything I do at all, yet I'll make out like it's different. So when Scotty Brooks comes out and says, I'm monitoring minutes, I'll look to reduce them, whatever he says, it means nothing. He has no self-discipline in game, or he's just a shit game planner, or he just lies. It's one of those 3 things. Because monitoring minutes does not mean 40 minutes for a 32-year-old center. It doesn't mean that. Johnny Wall, 27, 4 and 8, 3 steals and a block, tremendous. Otto Porter, he didn't have a triple one. He didn't have a Richie Beno. He had a triple one. 3 threes, 3 steals, 3 blocks. I should have looked this up as to how many times people have done that. I don't reckon anyone's done it this season. I'm sure it's been a relatively common occurrence, but it's not something I think we've seen that often. Good night from Otto as well. Obviously, and Gortat in his 40 minutes, 12, 16 and 4 with a block. He's going to continue these minutes until his leg falls off, because Mahinmi's not going to be an impact player this season at all. But the risk you have is that leg falling off. So I reckon if you can get top 50-ish value, maybe top 60-ish value for Gortat, maybe trading out of a 36-year-old or 32-year-old centre playing 38 minutes a night might be worth considering. Brattles Beal went 25, 4 and 6 in his monitored minutes, and Markeith had 26 minutes, 13 and 5 for Markeith. He wasn't actually horrible, but we've seen over the last couple of games the trend coming back for Scotty Brooks to play more Oubre Porter at the 3-4. Oubre played 25 in this one. Now, Markeith in a 10-team league, I don't reckon you need to hold him, and he is becoming borderline in 12-teamers with the way that he's currently playing. So have a look at it, see how it fits, but Oubre, who was pushing towards that before his concussion, then dropped completely off and was horrible, is working his way back and is starting to put up some okay numbers. For the Mavericks, they went with a different starting lineup, moved Andrew Bogut to the bench, and he ended up hurting his knee right at the end, banging knees with Otto Porter, limped to the bench. So this is Bogut, so who knows how long he's going to be out. Well, he might not be out at all, but his impact is really limited. They started Dorian Finney-Smith, so don't think that this means great things for Dwight Powell, this Bogut benching. It doesn't. Nothing changes for Powell. Powell, in fact, only played 13 minutes here, so there's no reason to really fiddle around with him in 12-team leagues. Bogut had 0 points and 6 rebounds. He can be cut in leagues that he has owned in outside of, say, 16-teamers probably. The pencil was great. He had a career high in assists with 5, 26, 7 and 5 with 2 triples and a block, playing his best position, which is the 4, and that's the way the Mavericks are running now. This is Harrison Barnes' team, as dumb as that sounds. This is the pencil's team now. Darren Williams hit 4 triples. He had 21 points and 6 assists. Has to be owned everywhere, that's common sense. And Seth Curry continued to put up nice numbers, 16, 2 and 2 with 4 triples and a steal. Obviously, JJ Barea is going to cramp that, but he did that in just 22 minutes. So that's a good and a bad thing. You go, okay, he's great in limited minutes, but it's also like, okay, he played just 22 minutes. So when Barea goes, what does he actually go down to? And that makes him a tough guy to have long-term value. Devin Harris also had his best night of the year, 17 points in 17 minutes with 4 triples. Well, Wes Matthews was far from brilliant, 12 in 38. Dirk played 24. That's encouraging. 11 and 9 for Dirk, so decent numbers. Not a 10-team league guy, I don't think, but I do think that you should have him in 12s, while Dorian Finney-Smith, who replaced Bogut in the starting lineup, 0 and 6. Yeah, this is just Finney-Smith. He's going to be a 22 to 26-ish minute type of guy, and it's going to be probably 18, 20-team leagues at best. He'll have the occasional breakout, and people seem to foam over it, but it just doesn't, consistently, it just doesn't happen enough for him to be a guy that I think is really worth major consideration. The next game is the Raptors and the Spurs. Really hard to talk about this too much because it was an absolute ass-kicking basically from the word go. Kyle Lowry was horrible. 29 minutes for Lowry, 6-4 and 2 on 2 of 9 shooting. Now, I have been harping on about Kyle Lowry saying this shooting cannot continue. Well, it did not continue. He was 0 of 7 from 3, 2 of 9 from the field. If there's one thing that you can never bet against, it's math, and it's regression to the mean, and Lowry suffered it. So, he's still good. There's no worries there, but as I've been saying and harping on and talking shit about for weeks, is that if someone thinks that Kyle Lowry is a top 7, top 6, top 10 player, take that other top 10 guy back in return, because Lowry will not be able to sustain this shooting percentage, and it fell off in a big way here. DeMar DeRozan was alright. It was better than alright. 26 points on 21 shots, while Teza Ross had 17 and 5 with 2 steals and 2 triples, and he has been fantastic this season. Ross, a really good 14-team league guy and an excellent streamer in 12-teamers. Much better than anything we saw. I thought Ross was going to break out before last season, and he was horrible, and the breakouts just come really 12 months later. He's been really impressive, while Damari Carroll continues to be the opposite of impressive. 19 minutes. Now, he did have 10 and 5. He did have 2 steals, but he just can't play. He just can't play big minutes, and he can't play them well. So he is a significant disappointment. This was a game with no Pat that Jakob Poeltl played 26 minutes, acquitted himself okay at times, still got torched defensively, 4 and 9 with 2 steals for Poeltl there, and Bebe Nogueira was horrific. He had just some disgustingly bad offensive plays, missed all 5 of his shots, blocked 3 shots, so that's good, but offensively jacked up a 3, which is just embarrassingly bad, and he was not great. He is not someone I believe is a 12-teamer. Someone pointed this out to me. I wish I remembered your name. Someone pointed out to me on Twitter today that Pascal Siakam, not only does he start games, but when it's garbage time and it's blowout junk time, he plays with the Fred VanVleet. Like, that's where he's at. He's a junk time specialist that starts games. So when they got VanVleet in, when they started playing Bruno Caboclo, Siakam was there in that group. That's where he is, but he continues to start. 26 minutes for Siakam, 2 and 2, obviously not bouncing back after, or not continuing that form where he had the 10 boards and 4 blocks last time. As for Bruno, a 3 trillion. Norm Powell also struggled, 0 of 4 from the field, 2 and 2. Now, Norm Powell's the player I'm most excited about heading into trade deadline, because you hear his name bandied about, and if he goes somewhere and gets a role, he's going to fly home. He's going to be a top 70 guy post-trade deadline if he happens to go to a situation where he finds himself in 27 minutes a night. Maybe that's a struggle, but 3-and-D wings who can shoot and do a lot of stuff and have got size, can be really useful. So He's definitely a name to keep an eye on in that sort of a scenario. For the Spurs, Kawhi was fantastic, 25, 4 and 2, but it's the 5 triples, the 2 steals, the 3 blocks, and the 8 of 12 from the field that really gets it going for him. While LaMarcus Aldridge apparently can't miss anymore. 11 of 16, and he is shooting 73% in the last 4 games. He went 23, 8 and 6 with a block and a 3. This is progression to the mean for LaMarcus because he was disgustingly bad to start the season, and now he is a top 12 player over the last week. I don't think that sticks, but he's found himself back inside the top 50 over the course of the season, and we saw this last season that he's a bloke that just takes time to adjust to stuff. He doesn't handle change well. Didn't handle it last season coming across for Portland. Didn't handle it this season trying to work out how to play next to Pau Gasol. 2 months in, and he's roasting things. But he's not going to shoot like this. No one is. Kyle Lowry's not. LaMarcus Aldridge isn't. No one is. So he's not going to stick in this top 20 range, but I think he'll comfortably settle in the 35 to 45 range for the rest of the year, which is something his owners will be pretty happy about given the way he started out the year. Tone Parker's gathering some momentum, I guess. 22 minutes for Tone, 15, 2 and 8. But the biggest impact Tony Parker is having on standard leagues is it's erasing anything to do with Patty Mills. Mills can be dumped in any 12-team format that you're handling him. Parker can be streamed because 15, 2 and 8 is clearly useful. And his assists are at 5.5 per game over the last couple of weeks. His scoring is up, but he's still outside the top 100. And it's coming on 57% shooting, which again, Parker's a good shooter. He's not that good. He's not. There's no point guards. It's a 57% shooter. So expect some regression there for Parker, but he's putting up some good numbers now and absolutely can be streamed in, especially in 14-team league formats. Pau only played the 19 minutes, went 5, 4 and 3 with 4 blocks, but nothing to really read into. It was an absolute smashing of a game. This is a game where we saw 8 minutes of Davis Bertans, and that's probably all we need to say about that one. The Miami Heat and the Phoenix Suns, man, the Heat, no Dion Waiters, no Hassan Whiteside, no Justice Winslow. And then before the game, Tyler Johnson ruled out with a migraine and Jimmy Johnson ruled out with the food poisoning. So the Heat had 8 active players. So that's why we saw massive games from Will Reed. We saw Goran Dragic return and go 24, 3 and 9 in 38 minutes. We saw Joshie Richardson play 37 minutes. Didn't shoot well, going 5 of 16, but 11, 2, 3, 2, 2 is still productive. Still has to be owned everywhere. And he's owned in 56% of leagues. Josh has to be owned in all 12s and probably all 10s. We had Wayne Ellington go back to the bench and play 37 minutes. 12, 1 and 1. He is going to lose nearly all of that when Dion Waiters returns. And Scooter Magruder played 33 minutes and went 8 and 5 with 2 triples. He's going to lose all of that when Waiters and Justice Winslow return as well. Lukey Babbitt and Derek Williams continue to struggle. 7 points for Babbitt, 3 points for Derek Williams, and that power forward position is an absolute nightmare for this team. On to the Phoenix Suns, and confusion reigns. The Suns get the victory, 99 over 90, and whenever Earl Watson thinks we're going to win, then it's time to roll out the big minutes to the old blokes. Tyson Chandler played 32 minutes, 5 and 20 with 2 blocks. That's clearly useful. But then he'll play 22 in a game where they're getting blown out. And that tends to happen more often than they win. So we look at Chandler and go, can you own him? Like, sure, that looks good, but the 6 and 7 night doesn't look quite as good. He's more a 14-team league guy, while Alex Len producing in limited minutes. Only the 16 minutes for Len, 9 and 8 with 3 blocks, and I cannot disagree more with the shit that Earl Watson pulls. Like, just give Len more minutes. And this TJ Warren bullshit, like, there's no injury. It's not an injury concern. It's not a back-to-back issue. He played 17 minutes, took 3 shots and had 2 points, and was benched so that PJ Tucker can run out there 32 minutes. Now, I understand, Earl, you want to get a victory. But, come on, man. Like, Warren played fantastically in the last game. Okay, he had some defensive issues, and he benched Devin Booker early in this game for defensive problems as well. But the roller coaster frustration is real. So keep holding on to him. Keep holding on to Warren. No reason to drop after this, but it is extraordinarily frustrating, the shit that he pulls. On the positive side, he did give Devin Booker 35 minutes after benching him, and Booker is weird in the sense of that he will be up, and you don't know what Booker you're getting in each game. You don't know what Booker you're getting in each half. Like, he started off this game ice cold, finished up with 27 points on 9 of 19 shooting. going 3 of 6 from 3, which I believe he missed his first 4 from 3. No, he didn't do that because he hit 3 of them. I think he missed his first 3. Yeah, 27, 2 and 4 with 3 triples is a really good night, but his field goal percentage is making him a punt-only sort of a player. If he can do this is fine, but he's just so up and down. It's really hard to get a grasp on what Booker's going to do on a nightly basis. Bledsoe went 17, 4 and 7, 2 steals, 2 triples, and he wasn't a good shooter tonight, 4 of 14, while Marquise Chris, clearly the best game that he's had in all year, 31 minutes for Chris, 18 and 6, had a pair of steals, a pair of threes. Yeah, nice numbers on 7 of 11 shooting. How much can we trust this? The answer's probably very little. He's still ranked outside the top 300 for the season. Marquise Chris, I don't think there's any reason to go and grab him in 12s or 14s. If you're looking 18, 16 maybe, I would consider having a look at it, but we saw that little run that he had where he played 25 minutes and then he went back to 18 and sucked again, and this could be very well that case again. Dragon Bender played just the 16 and had 2 and 2. While Brandon Knight, who was out with a wrist problem, he ceded his minutes to Tyler Ulis in this one, who had 2-1-1 in 13 minutes. Let's go on to Sacramento and Denver. The Kings get the big victory, 120-113. There was no Ty Lawson. Originally, it was weird. It was like the beat reporters were tweeting, Lawson's fine to go. He's not going to wear a mask. He's ready to go without the mask, and he's got no issues with it. And literally 30 seconds later, the next tweet, Ty Lawson is out. What? What happened was he warmed up and got blurred vision and couldn't see, so he couldn't play. So we don't know how long that will last, but I don't imagine it's long. But what happened in his absence is that Darren Collison played 36 minutes, had 26 points on 16 shots, and had 7 assists. So, yes, Darren Collison hasn't forgotten how to play. So that's the big positive there. It is not like that Ty Lawson had been playing so well that's why they were limiting Collison. It was more a factor that Collison had been terrible, and they were splitting the minutes that way. So if Collison can play well, then he'll play minutes. He'll play 30-plus minutes because, again, it's not like that Lawson was just knocking it down and going, you have to play me because I'm so good. It was like Jaeger was just going, shit, all right, man, do it because Collison sucks. That's sort of the way that I got the impression that it was running. This maybe kickstarts Darren. Go and grab him if he's around. If he's dropped in at 12, grab him. In at 10, I wouldn't have an issue with grabbing him because he can be a top 50 player in 35 minutes. He can be that guy. So it depends on who I'd be dropping, but I'd be having a look at it because maybe this is what is needed to kick him along. Boogie went 31, 6 and 6. Not an efficient 10 of 25, but 8 of 8 from the line. 0 turnovers for all you people who love turnovers as well. You'd be happy with that. And just to add into a night of coaching shit-talking, Dave Jaeger, we're probably going to have to go younger. Malachi, we'll have to give him some minutes. Malachi Richardson totaled 0 minutes, and worn-out bag of dog shit Aaron Aflalo played 30. 19 minutes with 3 rebounds, 2 assists, a steal, and 2 triples for Aflalo. So, you know what? He played very well. Give him credit. 8 of 11 from the field. But this is Aaron Aflalo, man. This is the Aaron. If we had this 5 years ago and he was back in Denver, then I'd say, he'll probably continue doing this. But he hasn't been able to do it. Don't get excited from this performance. Ben McLemore, he's placeholder starting at the moment, 15 minutes, does nothing there. Matty Barnes saw 24 minutes for 5 points, but it was Costa Koufos who stepped up in Rudy Gay's absence in this one. He had 18 points with 5 rebounds with an assist and a steal, 8 of 9 shooting. Now, Koufos can do this sort of stuff. He can put up numbers. It's hard for him to do that. And that front court pairing is just so bloody weird that they continue to run with that. Don't get overly excited about Costa Koufos. I'm sure you won't. Just a quick note. Willie Cauley-Stein is absolutely horrible. He is objectively terrible. He can't play. He has lost all confidence. His defense is down. He's never had any offense. His free throws are abysmal. I really worry about his place in the NBA at this point. And often I'll say this is a great time to attack dynasty owners. If I own Cauley-Stein in a dynasty and someone offers me anything, I reckon I'd take it at this point. It started in Summer League. It's like something happened to him at the end of last season to now. George Karl got fired and took his soul with him. He has been a mess, a disaster, really. And I don't know if it ever gets better. It's just been very weird. For the Nuggets The Rooster, 24, 4 and 3 in 33 minutes, but you don't care about the Rooster. You want to hear about Yusuf Nurkic because I've already been bombarded with questions. Nurk played 18 minutes, 16, 6 and 4, a steal and a block, hit all 4 of his free throws, 6 of 8 from the field. That's a brilliant performance. But I'll pour some cold water on it for you, just, again, to provide an opposing point of view. Ken Farid is out. Now, Ken Farid's bad. I don't like Ken Farid, and I think Nurkic should be playing over him. And maybe he does now, given the last 2 games and how well Nurkic has played. Maybe this pushes Farid out of the ridiculous notion of Farid being a center and having Nurkic as the backup. So that's a definite possibility. But I don't know how much trust we should put in Nurkic, to stay emotionally stable, because he has significant issues with that and clashes with Malone a ton. There's so much psychological problems going on with that team and that sort of a pairing. I don't know how much I trust Nurkic to be a 6 of 8 shooter and hit all 4 of his free throws every night. And this is also a night where Nikola Jokic played just 28 minutes. So that gave some extra run to Nurkic. So if Jokic played 32, Nurkic would play 14. And maybe less if Farid was around. Do I add Nurkic in 12-team leagues? It's a debatable question. This line here is clearly a 12-team line, but that's something that's probably going to come in 25 to 26 minutes a night on a regular basis, not this blow-up sort of performance like this. So I wouldn't be getting too overly excited. In a 14-teamer, yeah, there's a real chance that he takes over Ken Farid's role, and he absolutely should, because Farid should not be playing center. I'm not coaching, and Malone has been known to make a few decisions that I disagree with. Maybe that's probably understating it a bit. In a 12-team league, I wouldn't be wasting my time on Nurkic, honestly, unless I've owned Willie Cauley-Stein or someone like that, and that's obviously not happening. I don't see the path for him to be a regular top 100 contributor. But it was good to see this sort of performance back, because I do really believe in Nurkic's talent. It's not that I don't believe in his talent. I think he can be a good player. It's how's the relationship with the coach, how's the rotation, what happens to him, where's his role, and it's not clear at the moment. Gaz Harris played 32, went 15, 1 and 3 with a steal and 3 triples. A good night from him. While Darrell Arthur returned to the rotation after having all these knee issues, he took up some of Farid's minutes too. 12 points with 4 triples in 18 minutes in this one. Nothing to get too excited about with Darrell, or as us Aussies would call him, Darryl. Wilson Chandler, 10 points, 3 rebounds. Not a great Wilson Chandler night, but he did some pretty good defensive stuff on Boogie Cousins. That limited him, though, and his fouls kept his playing time down. Fart and Will Barton. This is the fart part of Will Barton. 16 minutes, 3 and 5. And this is what I warn about with Will Barton, is he's not that good. And on nights when Gallo, Gaz, Wilson, when they're humming and they're playing solidly, there's just not minutes for Barton, because he's just not that good, and he is as streaky as they come. He is a 14-team leaguer for sure. There is no way I'd want anything to do with him in a 10-team league. And in a 12-team league, it really depends, but I own him in exactly 0 leagues. Manny Moutier didn't have a great night, 5 points, had the 6 assists. I still do believe in him in punt field goal builds, but that's really about it. Well, Jamal Murray is really off the boil at the moment. Love Murray long-term, but not really happening for him at the moment. All right, let's get into the last game of the night. Memphis and the Lakers. Marc Gasol, ankles, who cares? Who needs him? 22, 6 and 7 in 35 minutes for Gasol as the Grizzlies went down to the Lakers. Chandler Parsons, 15 minutes, 2 points. Not great. Now, there was an article that came out today that said Parsons is going to be... Now, it's hard to 100% know what he means, but he said that he's frustrated by the restrictions, playing minutes restrictions and back-to-backs, and then he says it will last for 1 to 2 months. Now, I don't know if it's the back-to-back not playing in, or if it's the 15-minute restriction. I'm going to think that it's the back-to-back that will last 2 months, not playing 15 a night. But it's worrisome. You can cut him. With the news that's coming out, with the fact that he's not actually improving, like the play's not improving, the minutes aren't even going up at the moment. If you're anywhere apart from first or second, you can get rid of Chandler Parsons in 10s or 12s, and maybe even close to 14s. Because if we're in for another month of 15 minutes a night, then it's not happening. And he's not improving, and this stuff that came out today was definitely concerning. This is the JaMychal Green that I did recommend to drop. 22 minutes, 3 and 6. He's had a couple of big games, but this was not a great one from him. Zebo went 11-9 in 28 minutes, and Mike Conley had 21 points in his 32 minutes. And there's just a hodgepodge of numbers all over the place here. Troy Daniels hit another 3 triples, and not a lot else happening here with this roster. For the Lakers, D'Angelo Russell, he's simmering. 33 minutes for D'Angelo, 8, 4, and 6, 6 triples, a steal. Importantly, 6 of 12 shooting. The top 50 is in aim. He is a prime candidate to be a top 50 January, February, March player, and started off that way fantastically. Julius Randle just drops a triple-double, 19, 14, and 11. The 1 of 4 from the line's annoying, but everything else is really good, and he's been very impressive this season, and I always give kudos when I'm wrong, and maybe I'm not 100%, I'm not saying I'm 100% wrong on Julius Randle, because he did have that disgusting stretch before he had to go and have his he didn't have his child before his child was born. But look, impressive. Big night from Tim Mozgov as well. Really hard to predict that. 38 minutes from Mozgov. 14 and 5 with a steal and a block. So he still got it. It's just a matter of will he get the minutes. In a general capacity, you're going to say no. That he's just not going to get the minutes on most nights. Lou Williams bounced back. 14 points in 17 minutes for Lou. In 10-teamers, I don't necessarily think you own him, but in 12s, obviously you still do. But he's not going to be the same guy as before. While Jordy Clarkson was 6 of 9 for 16 points in 18 minutes with 7 rebounds. But that's 2 straight games in a row that both... Well, that's what 2 straight in a row means. Josh, you're talking shit. Lou Williams and Jordan Clarkson have played under 20 minutes in 2 consecutive games. That is a concerning sign. It's a concerning sign for them, but it's great for Nick Young and D'Angelo Russell. And is Luke Walton going to this? Was the first 2 months of the season for Luke an experiment to see how the rotation goes, and now he's solidified it, and it's like, these are our starters, they are playing big minutes? That is definitely a possibility. So watch out with Clarko. I don't believe that Clarko's a 10-teamer, and I think he's a touch-and-go 12-teamer. Uncle P had 20 points in 27 minutes, hit 6 triples, high efficiency again, which will drop, it has to, but he's a really good source of threes at the moment, and it's very hard to ignore. While the Lu Deng resurrection, I don't know what happened there, only the 3 points, took 4 shots, but surprisingly 6 assists and 6 rebounds. I don't reckon you got to keep holding him in 12-teamers. Well, Tom Robinson went down to 4 minutes, Tariq Black to 10, with Tim Mozgov playing as much as he did, and Brandon Ingram just continues to struggle, especially from a fantasy point of view. All right, that is the end of the Tuesday recap portion of the show. I'm going to take a quick break, and then we're going to be back and previewing the lightest day of the week, which is Wednesday, where there are 7 games on. Alright guys, we're back. Let's talk perfect lines on FanDuel. Isaiah Thomas at 57.3 and Reg Jackson at 47.4. The shooting guards, Braddles at 37.8. That's Bradley Beal, and Devin Booker at 31.4. Small forwards, Paulie George, 44.2, and the pencil at 41.9. Power forward, LaMarcus Aldridge, 42.6, and Randall at 48.2. And at centre, Big Will Reed at 51.6 for a total of 402.4, and that was $59,700 worth. On DraftKings, Isaiah Thomas, 62. Braddles Beal, 40. Bob Cove, 39.5. Townsy, 53.75. Will Reed, 54.5. Reggie Jackson, 52.25. Randall at 53.75. And Dazza Collison at 41 for $396.75, and that was $49,900 with a $100 amount left over. Let's get into these games. As I mentioned, there are 7 of them, which is the lowest amount this week in the perfect NBA week. The first one we're going to take a look at is the Atlanta Hawks traveling to Orlando. The Hawks are favored by 3.5, and the total here is 205 points. The injury we need to check up on is Evan Fournier for Orlando, who's missed the last few with that heel contusion. If he is out, it becomes Jody Meeks' time. Now, Meeks has been putting up some some impressive or very impressive numbers. In fact, really going off. Is that a fair way of putting it? Yeah, I'd say so. He's been putting up some very, very impressive type numbers. Meeks, if we look at what he's done in fact, in his last game on DraftKings, he had 32 points, which is obviously a huge amount at 4,400, and is averaging across the last 5 games, where he's been averaging 28 minutes a night, 23 points. Now, his salary over on DraftKings is 4,400, so it is it's a fairly expensive salary, and the likelihood of him getting those 32 points again, I would have to think is pretty low. So even if Fournier misses, I'm not sure that Meeks... Well, I'm not sure. The matchup's a positive one for him. I don't think that Meeks is going to be a guy that becomes an auto plug-and-play sort of a guy at that salary. Yeah, he relies a lot on his shooting, and a bad shooting night will obviously make him not as valuable, but clearly impressive in the last couple of games. Let's get into these games now. Or not get into these games, get into this game. We'll start off with the point guards, where we always do. And this is a good spot for both of these, because we know that Atlanta is the easiest team for point guards to match up against, or they have been recently anyway. So that opens things up for Lord Alfred Payton, who has been relatively impressive. In the last game, he put up 43.75 points over on DraftKings. He's priced on DraftKings at 5,900. Which is obviously a pretty decent salary. He's at 6,000 over on FanDuel. I like him as a tournament guy, probably more on FanDuel with the upside there. His last 3 games against Atlanta have given you 42.5 points a game. So it wasn't, look, he killed him in the last game, but it wasn't just that one. It's been the other ones as well. And with the ease of the matchup, I really like him. He is a tough guy to look at in cash. So at almost $6,000 on both sites, it does make it a tough one, but you know what? He's absolutely in calculations. Dennis Schroeder at 6,800. I like him. I like him more on DraftKings. The scoring system is better for him there. He's averaging 35 over the last 3. On FanDuel, he's averaging just 31 over the last 5. But still, the matchup is sort of a neutral one for him. But I think you should feel fairly confident with Schroeder about getting 30-ish points, which at that sort of salary is not too bad. DJ Augustin, Malcolm Delaney, CJ Watson, they're not really worth considering. Fournier at 6,100, if he plays, I do like it, but we obviously don't know that at this point. And similar story for him over on DraftKings, where he is priced at 6,000. If he plays, I think there's value in that. Other shooting guards, Kyle Korver is actually playing well. He's averaging 27 over the last 3, and subsequently we've seen his salary drive up to 4,200, which is a $500 price rise over on FanDuel, and he's at 4,200 as well on DraftKings. But the numbers have been fine, so I absolutely think that he is a tournament guy to have a look at, but I would not feel any confidence of playing him in cash. Timmy Hardaway had a massive game in the last one. He's at 3,800, 36 points in the last game, but his consistency is much worse than what Korver is. In fact, he's one of the most inconsistent players in the entire NBA for guys who regularly get minutes. So Timmy Hardaway is a bloke that I would look at and say, yeah, in a tournament, but how likely is it for him to back up a big game with another big game? And the answer to that is pretty unlikely. Small forwards, Aaron Gordon, 4,500 on FanDuel, 4,600 on DraftKings. Just had a casual 38 in the last game, which is clearly great value at 4,800. Now 4,500. The salary has risen by $400 on FanDuel, which is a little bit off-putting. On DraftKings, it's actually dropped by 200. But I think that his upside is obviously fantastic. The problem is that he could drop a 9 or a 10 on you. The matchup doesn't bother me. I think it's a decent matchup. In fact, it's a marginally positive one for him, and the ease for him is pretty okay here. So I reckon the chances of Aaron Gordon getting 25 are relatively high. In fact, he's averaging over 25 in the last 5 games. Yeah, there's been a 9-point game in there, but there's been a 38-pointer as well. So a little bit tough in cash, but not a complete write-off in that format of the game. So I do like Gordon. Kenty Bazemore, man, he is bad. He is at $4,000, but He only played 19 minutes in the last game, so that's a concern with Bazemore. No chance I would ever want to deal with him in cash at this point, but I think you can have a look at him in tournaments because he will have the occasional big game. I just don't trust it really at all. Tabo has been pretty poor lately, to be honest. He's at 4,100. I wouldn't want to be spending 4,100 on him. And Jeff Green.
My name is Jeff.
I don't think Jeff Green's going to be worth too much of a look. Let's talk power forwards. Paulie Millsap is at 8,200 on FanDuel, and that's because his salary's risen by $700, so that's not great. It's risen by 600 on DraftKings up to 7,600, so it makes him somewhat of a turn-off on both those sites. But he's averaging 45 in the last 3, and at those sort of salaries, that gets it done. The matchup is a good one. This should be a boost to what he can do in this sort of a matchup. But that salary bump turns me off him, and he doesn't make, on either FanDuel or DraftKings, it doesn't make him a real priority target. 6,700 for Serge Ibaka on FanDuel. He's done okay against Atlanta in the past. Still, it just doesn't really fill me with great confidence, though. I feel like his upside's not high, but the chance of a stinker is pretty decent as well. So not really keen there with him. At center, Dwighty Howard. Yeah, like this one for Dwight. He's at 7,700 on FanDuel, 73 on DraftKings. We've got the Orlando revenge type situation. I think that you should feel pretty confident with Dwight getting 35 plus here, and at 7,700. You probably want more than that, but I do think he's not the best center on the board, far from it, but he's a good play on both sides, probably a little bit better on DraftKings. Nick Vucevic playing a lot more minutes lately, averaging 39 across the last 3 on FanDuel, and he's priced at 7,000 there and 6,300 on DraftKings. If we knew he was going to be getting these 30 minutes a night consistently, then I'd be all for it. But the Bismack Biyombo shadow looms. Biyombo has played less than 23 minutes for 4 straight games, so that makes me think that Vogel is moving away, but I don't trust Vogel yet. I don't fully believe that he will do that. So that makes Vucevic a very attractive GPP guy and a somewhat risky cash play, but not a horribly risky cash one, especially with the way that trends are going. It has clearly been in his favor. So that is a good thing. Let's move on to the next game now, and we're going to talk about the Oklahoma City Thunder, and they are taking on the Charlotte Hornets. The Hornets are favored by 2.5, and the total here is 209 points. The Marco Bellinelli injury is one we want to check on. With Bellinelli out, that moves Jeremy Lamb and Michael Kidd-Gilchrist into consideration. Cody Zeller has already been ruled out with his concussion, so we'll talk about this game knowing that Cody Zeller is out of action, of course. At point guard, it begins and ends with Russell Westbrook. He's at 11,800 over on FanDuel, and that's a pretty fair price. Anytime I see Russ under 12,000 on FanDuel, I get pretty interested in it. But if we look at what Russ has done, the last 3 games he's averaging 43. Now there was an ejection game in there, but that's not great. The last 5 under 50 as well. So what do we do with Russ? I think that you could always look at him and consider him worth a go. The matchup here is very good against Charlotte. I think that he's worth a go, but not a 100% must-play guy. In terms of point guards on this slate, if you're spending up, Russ is the way to go. He's at 12.6 on DraftKings, but again, it's the same story. If you're spending up at point guard, it might be the way to go, but I don't believe necessarily that spending up at point guard is the way to go in this slate of games. Kemba Walker, the other point guard here, that is a massive salary rise for him over on FanDuel, where he's risen by $1,000. He is now at 8,400. On DraftKings, it was just 300, but that puts him to 8,200, and that makes it really, really tough to consider him a guy to use. He's averaging 47 across the last 3, so clearly putting up good numbers. The matchup is not a concern. That salary is just really high. I wouldn't want to use it in cash, but I would be okay in tournaments and thinking that he can go for 50 because he's coming off a game where he had 56. So that's fairly obvious that he can do that. But I don't put a huge amount of faith in it being a consistent type of performance. Shooting guard Vic Oladipo, I like it at 5,400. He had 30 points in his second game back. He's at 55 over on DraftKings. I reckon you should feel pretty good about 27 to 28 out of Vic, and a 30-plus performance would not be a shock. I think he's a really good play at that mid-price shooting guard level. Nick Batum's at 7,800. The salary's dropped by $200. It's probably a little bit high, to be honest. The matchup here is not in his favor. He's coming off a game where he wasn't as good as what he's been, putting up just 34 points. So I think Batum is somewhat of a fade here, even especially on DraftKings, where he's priced at $8,000 over there as well. And as I mentioned, Jeremy Lamb, who is averaging 23 over the last 3 games with Bellinelli out, he's at $4,000. Absolutely fine if we hear that Bellinelli's out. The matchup is not negative, it's not positive for him, so that's somewhat of a concern. But in a situation where Bally's out, I still think that he can exceed that $4,000 price point on him, and he's at 41 on DraftKings, so the same story applies there. Small forwards, not really much to love here. Jeremy Grant, Andre Robertson, they're both minimum guys, and for good reason. Marco Bellinelli is at 4,100. We don't know if he's playing, so I was going to say you might look at him in a GPP, but I don't even think his upside is that high in that scenario. And Mick Kidd-Gilchrist back to averaging just 18 over the last 3, and that's without Bellinelli, so a little bit tough to consider using him as well. 3,200 for Jeremy Grant on DraftKings is a little bit more appealing, but even then, it is strictly a GPP type of scenario. Power forward Marv Williams at 4,300 had resurged and has re-slumped. I don't think either of those two are words, but you know what I mean. Averaging just 18 points in the last 3, Marv, 12 in the last game. 4,300 makes him tournamenty, but not feeling great about it. Enes Kanter really dipped in the last game, 9 points in 22 minutes. Didn't see any shots. Now, the addition of Victor Oladipo does take some usage away from Kanter. 5,300 in a good matchup is not a bad price for Kanter. I wouldn't want to use it in cash, though. I don't think he's really too useful there. Frank Kaminsky got some extra run, didn't really convert it into much DFS-wise. He's at 4,300. Not really a great guy to have a look at in that situation. And Domantas Sabonis, I don't hate Sabonis on DraftKings as a tournament guy. He's at 3,000, and in the last 5 games, he's had a 7x game, which, as you would know, is really good. It was a 21-point performance. But I don't really put a huge amount of faith in that being something that's going to continue all that often. So he's a fade in majority of cases. At center, Steve Adams at 5,600, had 41 in the last game, has been putting up some good numbers. This is a good matchup for him, especially without Zeller. So I think you should feel relatively good about putting Steve Adams in on both DraftKings and FanDuel. And the replacement for Zeller, now Roy Hibbert starts. His minimum salary, he put up 5 points in the last game. Yeah, I wouldn't be banking on him. But Spencer Hawes is the one we want to look at. He's minimum as well. He's at 3,500 over on FanDuel. In fact, he's 3,500 on both sites. And played 26 minutes in the last game for 18 points, which at 3,500 is basically a win. I wouldn't be putting too much cash faith in it, but absolutely I would look at it in a tournament and go, all right, Spencer Hawes can produce. We've seen him do it. Get him 27, 30 minutes maybe, which is a possibility. He could have a 27, 28 point night. And that obviously would be fairly beneficial. Let's move on to the next game. It is the Milwaukee Bucks, and they are taking on the New York Knicks. The spread is a pick'em, which you give me Milwaukee every day of the week here. The total is 213, and Kristaps is doubtful. So with that Achilles soreness, I thought Porzingis would be ready to go for this game. It turns out he is not, obviously. So we're going to get a mishmash of front court options. Last game they started Lance Thomas, and he was terrible. Whether Jeff Hornacek does that again remains to be seen. But what it has meant in the last couple of games with Porzingis out is Joakim Noah gets more playing time. So he becomes an option, which is such a weird thing to say at the start of 2017. Point guards. Brogo, 4,000. Dally's out already, so we know that. Brogo at 4,400. Didn't quite live up to it in the last game, just the 20 points, but the 32 minutes is important. And after a strong start to the year defensively against point guards, the Knicks have dipped a little bit there. So Brogdon is in a mildly negative situation. It's not a situation where it was a real big negative as it was earlier in the season. So I think Broggo here at 4,400 is absolutely, and there are quite a few cheap point guards out there: Austin Rivers, Raymond Felton, Michael Carter-Williams. Broggo is probably the pick of the bunch with a pretty nice matchup that he's got here as well. So I reckon you could be looking at even 30 for Brogdon here. That's where he could get to. Derrick Rose at 6,600. This has been consistent all year. As a point guard playing the Bucks, it's not a good time for you. I don't want to spend 6,600 on Derrick Rose. That is for damn sure. If we look at these guys over on DraftKings, it's less appealing. 5,300 for Brogdon just probably puts him out of reach for me. And Derrick Rose at 64. So a similar story for Rose. So I don't really like the point guards on that site there. Courtney Lee for the shooting guard. Well, actually, let's talk Brandon Jennings. 4,500, coming off some decent games. I don't want to spend it. That's a $500 price rise on FanDuel for Brando, so no interest there, and he's at 43 on DraftKings, so also no interest. Courtney Lee's at 4,000. I don't think Courtney Lee has very much tournament upside, but especially where he's priced at 38 on DraftKings, you can play that, get 20, get 21, and I think you should feel relatively confident about low-end return of value. Have a look at it if you need some cheapness to fill out the rest of your roster. Yanni at 10,500. Here we go. This is all aboard for Yanni here. I think we should be looking at 50. He's averaging 53 in the last 3. His lowest score in his last 5 is 42. He's at 10.4 on DraftKings, 10.5 on FanDuel. Go ahead. You should feel pretty confident about getting 50 with the upside of 70 here for Antetokounmpo. Justin Holiday inexplicably went down to 14 minutes in the last game with Lee back, and you would have to think that that's going to be the way that Hornacek runs things, meaning he is out of our minds. Melo at 7,500. Really like this without Porzingis for Melo. He had 39 in the last game. You like him on both sides, 71 on DraftKings. You should be looking at 35, potentially even 40 points here for Melo. Positive matchup. This is a good spot for him, I hope. Michael Beasley, Mirza Teletovic, Tony Snell, Lance Thomas, Mindaugas, Kuzminskas, none of those guys should be really sniffing your lineups. Jabari Parker, 7,200. No Porzingis for him to match up on, although he does guard threes at times, so maybe he takes on Melo. But he's been putting up some really impressive numbers, averaging 36 across the last 5, Jabari. I think that he is solid. I'm not sure how high his upside actually is, but at 7,200 on DraftKings, same price on FanDuel, I think he's absolutely fine as a cash play, and you should have a fairly high degree of confidence of Parker being able to return that value. Now we get to the centers. Joakim Noah, he's at 4,900 on FanDuel, he's at 5,000 on DraftKings. You'd probably be surprised to know that he is averaging 26.5 in the last 3 games. In fact, he's averaging 30 over the last 5. And at 4,900 in a game without Porzingis, when he's getting 29 minutes a game, somewhat inexplicably, and in a positive matchup, really hard to go past Noah. And it is a stupid thing to say at this point of the year, and it will come back to bite me on the ass. But I'm okay with Noah in tournaments. I'm not really sure I'm ready to go with him in cash, but it's hard to make the argument against it, to be honest, with the way that he has improved his play and Hornacek has improved his trust in him. I also like Reggie Munro, who is at 5,200 here, and he is averaging over 26 a game on FanDuel. He is at 4,800 on DraftKings, which is even better. So really, really like him over on DraftKings. We've seen Munro's minutes trend up. We've seen Henson's trend down, apart from the last game. So, I'm okay with Munro. Still, I don't have enough trust in Kidd to go with him in cash, but it's been an impressive ride. Johnny Henson, forget about that. Kyler Quinn, Billy Hernan-Gomez. We can't rely upon any of those guys. You might look at Johnny Henson in a tournament, but he's done nothing for weeks until the last game where he put up 24. And even then, 24 is not spectacularly good. It's good, but it's not spectacularly good. The Bulls, the Cavs, no spread release for this one. We have numerous injuries to pay attention to here. Dwayne Wade with his knee, Kyrie Irving with his hamstring, Mike Dunleavy with his ankle, and LeBron and Kevin Love, who are both ill. I've got them listed as probable. Neither of them are appearing on the injury report, but this is I more mark them this way just so you know that they're sick. So maybe you can expect somewhat limited output or to be sat down if the game gets out of hand, all that sort of stuff. So there is a risk with both of those players. I'm going to talk about this one assuming that Kyrie plays and assuming that Dwayne Wade is out. We already know that Denzel Valentine is out for the Bulls as well. So me assuming that Dwayne Wade is out, Michael Carter-Williams at 4,700, he definitely has not been blowing the doors off people or putting up huge numbers, but it's hard to go past him. He's 4,500 on DraftKings. Even in that last game, he put up 26 points while without it being a spectacular performance. The matchup against Kyrie is not a difficult one. I think that you should feel really confident about being able to get 25 points out of Carter-Williams. And he along with Brogdon, you could use those two blokes as your cheap point guards and fill up on some higher price players in other areas, like LeBron, like Jimmy Butler. Get these kind of guys on the wing and get these couple of cheap point guards. Jaren Grant also gets a boost. He's got a great matchup. He's at 3,700. He dropped 29 in the last game. Definitely fluky, but he is a tournament type guy that obviously can put up 29 points. And at 3,700, that is really good value. So Jaren Grant comes into play. Kyrie is at 8,600. Kyrie's been smashing stuff at the moment. He's averaging 50 over the last 5. The matchup against the Bulls point guards, not a tough one. But will he be limited somewhat with the hamstring? That's the concern with Kyrie. So I would look at him as a GPP guy. I don't, unless we just hear categorically ready to go, and even then, how much do we believe it? But I think that if Kyrie is ready, he'll be fine. He'll play 35-ish. But it is a risk at 8,600, no doubt about that. Shooting guards, Iman Shumpert, no. Straightforward. DeAndre Liggins, no. Jordy McRae, who could start in place of Kyrie, let's say no as well, because he was dreadful in the last game. Again, Wade, even if Wade plays, I don't really like the situation for him at his current salary. Small forwards, here we go. Dougie McDermott, who started the last game in place of Dwayne Wade. He's at 3,600 on FanDuel, 3,500 on DraftKings. I hate Doug McDermott's fantasy game. Look, there's a chance that he gets to 20 points, but it would strictly be a GPP play, and I really just don't really believe in Doug. His highest score in his last 5 has been 21, which at 3,600 clearly retains value. But his upside is so limited, his GPP, I wouldn't use him in cash, and his GPP upside is limited, so that sort of rules him out to me. LeBron looks good though, we know that. $10,000 for LeBron James. We look at him on DraftKings, he's at 10.5. Probably a little bit off him on DraftKings with that extra salary, but love it on FanDuel. There, we do have to be worried about that illness though, so there's definitely some concerns there that LeBron is not at 100%, maybe he's 95%, maybe he's not human and he's completely healed, which is, again, it's LeBron James, so it's a possibility. But wings do have had a tendency this year to put up some pretty spectacular numbers against the Bulls, and LeBron is a pretty spectacular wing. So is Jim Butler, but Jim's salary has jumped by $1,000 on FanDuel, so that's not ideal. He's up to 9,300 and he's at 9,000 on DraftKings. Now I do like him on DraftKings. I think there's a little bit more value there to be had. 93 on FanDuel. He's probably pushing it. Yeah, he's averaging 52 across the last 5. But I'm just not sure that I'm ready to go all in on him. But if Wade is out, he is absolutely worth a look. And if Wade is in, I would definitely fade at that price. But if Wade is out, I can totally get behind using Jim, especially on DraftKings. Dickie Jefferson, no. Mike Dunleavy, no. Power forwards, Nick Mirotic at 43. With Wade out, I think there's a chance that he can get 25 points, so he is a GPP guy with significant upside, of course. And Mirotic over on DraftKings is the same. I think he's a real chance for 25 or 26 points there. Tajee Gibson at 4,700. He's got a history of really destroying the Cavs. The last 3 games, he's averaging 31, which is a real surprise to me. Now, he has been trending down in a significant way, averaging just 18 in his last 5 encounters. But at 4,700 and 4,500 on DraftKings, I think there's upside to take a punt on him in a tournament if he can get a hold of Kevin Love. But the Cavs have, in general, in the past, they've been pretty good against defending power forwards. But for what Taj does, he still is able to put up almost similar numbers most times. So that's the encouraging thing. It's not just looking at the overall, okay, they're pretty good defensively against power forwards. I think that Taj could see a pretty decent game here. He's my sort of out-of-the-box flyery type of guy on this slate. As for Kev Love, he's at 8,500. Bulls front court, that's a bonus for him for sure. He should be looking at 40-ish, assuming that he is over that food poisoning issue. 8,800 on DraftKings as well. I think there's a real chance for him to get 40 plus or comfortably 40 plus. The 8,800 on DraftKings does make him a little bit harder to use, but still, I think that in terms of looking at the best high-priced power forwards, he is the one to look at. Centers, Robin Lopez, 4,400, has really struggled, and against the Cavs doesn't really make it easier. So he is going to be a tough guy for me to use, especially if they go Love Fry at 4-5. It's really going to be tough for Lopez to see enough minutes. Tristan Thompson at 48, good matchup for Thompson. Hasn't really been doing it though lately, so 4,800 just feels a little bit high for Tristan. He's at 45 on DraftKings, so that's getting more into appealing territory, but it's not quite there yet. Chris Felicio, the other centre, but really tough to consider using him. All right, let's get into the next game. We're talking Miami and Sacramento, both teams on a back-to-back after they played today. No spread currently out, and we've got a lot of injury situations here. Dion Waiters, Tyler Johnson, James Johnson are all questionable for Miami. Rudy Gay and Ty Lawson are both questionable for Sacramento. Hassan Whiteside and Justice Winslow are out for Miami, so at least we know that already, but otherwise, some pretty significant situations. Obviously, James Johnson misses, it's Willie Reed time. Dion Waiters doesn't really impact too much. Tyler Johnson, if he is out, then we're looking at more Goran Dragic, but Dragic is still a decent play anyway. The biggest one to look at there is James Johnson, because if he is out, it really unlocks Willie Reed. If Rudy Gay is out for Sacramento, it enables you to take a punt on Matty Barnes, maybe on Anthony Tolliver as well. And Ty Lawson, if he is out, then obviously it's all aboard Darren Collison. Let's talk assuming that all these guys are in. It's a big assumption, but let's talk about it assuming they're in as we go through all of this. Point guards, Dragic is at 7,000. I think that in this sort of a matchup, I think that Dragic is absolutely fine to use at that salary. Nothing that totally scares me off using him. 7,000 on FanDuel, 69
Giggity.
on DraftKings. Yeah, absolutely fine to use. He posted 40 plus points on both sites today. Yeah, absolutely okay with him. Despite it being a back-to-back, both teams are on a back-to-back, and I do think there's a really good chance of using him. As for Collison at 4,500, I would look at him at a GPP if Lawson is in, just because there's a chance he still keeps the big minutes, as I touched on a lot earlier about how Lawson hasn't been great, and a lot of the minutes reduction has been because of Collison's suckiness. If Lawson is out, though, we can add him to that pool of Brogdon, Carter Williams, Felton, Rivers in those cheap point guards, which are really going to make up the bulk of lineups, I believe. Tyler Johnson's a tough one to go for at 5,900 if he plays. I don't think we'd be looking down that route. Joshy Richardson's at $6,000 on FanDuel. That is far from appealing. 6,200 over on DraftKings. Again, far from appealing. So really tough to consider him a guy to use at that extended salary. So I think we'll give that a pass. Dion Waiters, if he returns, really tough again to consider that. Garrett Temple, no. Ben McLemore, Wayne Ellington, Aaron Aflalo. Ellington's a guy that if Johnson and Waiters are both out, you might take a punt in a tournament, but really that's about it. Small forwards, Rudy Gay, 7,200. I like Rudy Gay, but I wouldn't want to be trusting that at all, so that's a fade. Matty Barnes, if Gay is out at 3,800, is absolutely worth a look. At 4,200 on DraftKings, probably not as inspired to use him over there. And Scooter Magruder, he just plays, but is Scooter Magruder starting and playing 30 minutes a night? Is that Miami's way of tanking? I feel it might be. I feel that's just what it is. Like, we're just going to keep starting Scooter Magruder and not even placeholder starting him, playing him 35 a night. This is our stealth tank. This is what we're going to do. Let's keep Tyler Johnson at 29 minutes. Let's keep Joshy Richardson at 30 minutes unless every player is out, and let's keep giving Scooter Magruder minutes. I feel that could be just a stealth tank move from this team. At 5,900 at power forward, James Johnson. They've bumped his salary by $500 on FanDuel and by $200 on DraftKings up to 5,700. If he plays, though, I still do really like him because he'll play some of those center minutes, and he's been really productive, averaging 28 over the last 5. But that extra bump that they've given him, it takes a lot of the edge off him, so he doesn't become an absolute must-play guy. Anthony Tolliver at 3,600 on FanDuel and 37 on DraftKings. He's a punt GPP guy if Gay is out, and Babbitt and Haslam really have no appeal anyway. Willie Reed at $4,000. You would be intrigued to use him, clearly, because he put up 52 today. But everything I spoke about earlier with him remains the same. If James Johnson plays, do we get 32-minute Willie Reed? Do we get 18-minute Willie Reed? That's the big question. Do we get 52-point Willie Reed or 20-point Willie Reed? I still think that he is absolutely worth looking at $4,000, but the James Johnson situation means that he would be a prime fade candidate if Johnson plays, because I reckon his ownership will be through the roof, and there's a real chance that he doesn't go for as big as what he probably needs to. But in saying that, the salary is so low, $4,000 and $3,900 on DraftKings, that he could stumble his way into 20 points even in 22 minutes, and that shouldn't be too hard for him to get to. So, you know, he still does remain a really good play, but there is some cautious pessimism, maybe, is the best way to put it. Costa Koufos was big today, but I'm not sure we should really expect that to continue. Next game up, we've got Portland and Golden State. Could be a massacre, could be a real big massacre as well. The Warriors are favoured by 15.5, and the total is 224. Dame Lillard is doubtful, and Pat McCaw is questionable for Golden State. Let's talk point guards here. Steph has a history of eviscerating Portland. He's at 8,200. I don't really want to use Steph at 8,200. Sorry, give me him at 7,500 and I'll be fine. But the blowout risk here is a real factor, and Steph has really struggled to meet value most nights that he's played this year. He's at 83 on DraftKings. That's just not really appealing to me whatsoever. Sean Livingston, Shabazz Napier, it's Shabazz Napier, Shabazz Muhammad, because of course it is, because there's two different pronunciations of the word Shabazz. Shooting guards, Krabby, 3,800 for Alan Crabb. He's averaging 20 over the last three. He's going to play minutes. Now, whether he produces or not is a different story for Crabb, because he's not a great producer, but I do think that he is worth a look, and he is absolutely worth rostering just to fill out a cheap roster spot in that Courtney Lee sort of a mold. Hey, I need 3,800, $4,000 in my shooting guard position. Can Crabb do it? Now, at 4,200 on DraftKings, I'm much less enthused with him at that price, but the 38 on FanDuel, definitely better. CJ McCollum, he just dropped 59 in the last game, but that salary is at $8,000. He is averaging 81. No, he's not. He's averaging 41 over the last three, which is obviously great, but that's really bolstered by that 58-point performance. $8,000 is heading dangerously into punt territory. 8,600 on DraftKings is not punt, fade territory. 86 on DraftKings is a shitload of cash out of that salary cap, and honestly, the 3 games or so that Lillard has missed, McCollum was massive in one and very good in the other 2. But at that salary, very good doesn't cut it. So I reckon he is fadeable at those excessive salaries. Klay Thompson, it's at 6,900.
Giggity.
He's averaging 36 over the last 3, which is fine at that price, but the blowout factor is a real factor here. He's at a $400 price rise. No Klay for me. If we look at him on DraftKings, he's at 66. Same story. I can't really say that I'd be using Klay Thompson anywhere. Ian Clark, the last 2 times that he has played Portland, has missed 1 shot in about 20 attempts. Do we possibly tempt fate and go the minimum salary Ian Clark, who is averaging 22 points the last 3 times he's played Portland, and it would be higher if we looked at the last 2? Do we tempt fate? I can't see him going 90% shooting plus for the second consecutive game, also the third consecutive game against this team. But strange shit goes down. So don't write off Ian Clark from pulling one out of his ass, especially if Pat McCaw is out. That gives him some extra run. Mo Harkless is the small forward, 4,800. I don't really love it at that price. I think you can do better on this slate. Evan Turner, I'd say the same thing. And Kevin Durant, you look at it, it looks appealing at 9,900 on FanDuel, but he's only averaging 47 across the last 5, and I'd want him to do a little bit more with a blowout on tap here. At 96 on DraftKings, at a $300 price drop, I do think that is... I think that that's worth looking at in a GPP, hoping he goes off and has like a 40-point first half and then plays out the third quarter. Because he can definitely do that. We know that he can do that, but trusting it in cash with a 15-point spread is pretty tough to do. Power forward, El Farouk Aminu, 4,100, hasn't been getting it done, but he has got a good history against the Warriors, so I think he's a decent GPP type of a player. And Draymond is the only Warrior I feel really comfortable about looking at in cash. He's at 7,900 on FanDuel, he's at 75 on DraftKings, and I feel comfortable with him in cash. Mason Plumlee, it's the Warriors, forget that. Zaza, JaVale, we're not going to be looking at those two guys quite clearly. Let's round this bastard out with the last game of the night. Memphis and the Los Angeles Clippers. Remember these matchups that these teams had? Well, Chris Paul's doubtful. Blake Griffin's out. Who knows what we're going to get? Memphis is coming off a back-to-back, but this is Memphis, so coming off a back-to-back gives them energy. I don't know how it happens, but it does. Let's talk point guards. Austin Rivers is at 4,200. Ray Felton is at 4,400. Felton's averaging 30 across the last three. Both of these guys can be used. If I'm leaning one of them, I would probably lean Rivers, to be honest, despite the production that Felton's had recently. But you could totally make a case to use both of them in a GPP. I wouldn't want to use them both in cash because it tends to defeat the purpose. But there could be, no, not defeat the purpose. The likelihood of them both going off is not there. But in a GPP, they could, and at both of that salary, they could both put up 30-point performances because they will be playing different positions. So they are worth having a look at, both of these point guards. Conley at 6,800. I like Conley here. I think he's going to be a low-owned GPP type of guy. A lot of the defensive stats for the Clippers come with Chris Paul in, and Felton and Rivers are not Chris Paul. Conley has got a ridiculously good record against the Clippers, averaging 45 in the last three. 6,800 price tag on FanDuel is clearly not excessive. 67 on DraftKings. I reckon he is a very good low-owned GPP option. JJ Redick and Jamal Crawford, much like Rivers and Felton, they're both punty type, Felton and Rivers are both cash types as well, but I think Redick and Crawford are both GPP options. Just depends which way you want to go. Crawford had a big one in the last game, but he'd been fairly putrid before that, whereas Redick was also solid, and he's had some bad games in there as well. That's why I look at them as just GPP guys. Tone Allen at 46, probably a little bit tough to use Tone Allen at this point. Small forwards, Vince Carter, James Ennis, Wes Johnson, Luke Marmute. Chandler Parsons will be out most likely due to his, resting schedule. So I don't think there's any small forward you want to look at here. Mo Spates is up to 4,300 on FanDuel, and he's at 4,400 on DraftKings. He has been putting up good numbers, but at that salary, that's almost right on the value. The matchup is pretty shithouse for him, to be honest, going up against Marc Gasol. I don't think that he is someone that you want to really pay attention to. Zebo at 5,800. Some nice numbers from him recently, absolutely. Hate that it's 5,800. Really, really dislike that price. And he's at 56 on DraftKings. He is still a fade for me. JaMychal Green, I can't really get behind him either at 5,500. The centers, DeAndre Jordan, he's going to get Gasol'd. He's at 7,100 on FanDuel, so I'm not really, not a massive fan of that. So I reckon he is a fade. Whereas Gasol at 8,500, back-to-back with his ankle. David Fizdale did say some stuff, we're going to play him today, no problems, and we'll see what happens tomorrow. So that gives me some area for concern with Gasol, and I just don't want to spend 8,500 on him. Simple as that. All right, let's move into the picks of the day now before we round things out. On FanDuel, let's look at the point guards. There's so many here. I've gone with Broggo at 44. You could go with Carter Williams, Rivers, Felton, Collison. Yeah, so many options. Lord Alfred Payton, 6,000, and Russ at 11,800. Shooting guards, Alan Crabb, 38, Oladipo, 54, and Yanni at 10,500. Small forwards, Aaron Gordon, 45, Mello at 75, and LeBronald at 10,000. Power forwards, Taj at 47, Draymond at 79, and Love at 85. And the centers, Joakim Noah, 49, Greggy Munro, 52, and Boogie at 11,200. On DraftKings, MCW, 45, Schroeder, 66, and Westbrook, 12,600. Shooting guards, Lee, 38, Oladipo, 55, and Jim Butler at 9,000. Small forwards, Aaron Gordon, 46, Mello, 71, and Durant at 96. The power forwards, Aminu, 43, Draymond, 75, and Love, 88. And the centers, Greggy Munro, 48, Joakim Noah, 5,000, and Boogie at 11,500. On Moneyball, MCW minimum, Steph 77. That's a much better price for Steph. Russ at 12-1. Shooting guards, Brogos at 4,000. Depots at 54. Small forwards, Aaron Gordon 42, Mallow 75, Yarny 10-5. Power forwards, Will Reed at minimum, Paul Millsap 71 and Kevin Love 81. And the centres, Noah 43, Dwight Howard 73 and Boogie 10-4. Over on Draft Stars, Ray Felton 52, Oladipo 10.550 and Westbrook 22.250. Brogos at 5.4, Reddicks at 89 and McCullum's at 14.1. Small forwards, Joshy Rich at 7.650, Jabari's at 11.750 and Mallows at 14.8. The power forwards, Will Reed 5,000, Munro 8.850 and Boogie at 19.7. And rounding things out with the centres, Spencer Hawes 53, Dwight Howard 12.3 and Kevin Love 17,050. We are done here, guys. Follow me on Twitter at redrock_bball. Check out Basketball Monster and follow us over there at Bask Monster. We are done here, guys. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. See ya. Giannis Antetokounmpo.